Hello and welcome to episode 166 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, it's going to be probably a pretty short show. We don't know. I think the viewers and the listeners after the fact will actually have a better idea how long this podcast will go than we do at this moment. But we have a few things to talk about, including a potential secret tryout, which is just bizarre in of itself. And of course, we have the Major 3 Week 2 qualifier matches to talk about and give our predictions for. But before we do any of that, how are you doing, Big?
Doing all right, like you said, not a ton to talk about, and I'm anticipating it being a shorter show, but you worded it nicely there. I can probably go on a rant and lengthen this if I really wanted to, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, excited for another one and ready to go.
So the secret tryout that I mentioned, apparently this was something that was revealed on the Dope Check podcast by Breaking Point. So if you want to go check that out, please do. So C9 allegedly, reportedly, I don't know how you want to frame it. They secretly tried out Capsidal, of course, a former CDL player, I believe, for Boston and Florida, in place of Attach. And Temp, of course, another former CDL player, he confirmed it, or, I guess you can't really confirm something that is still alleged, but he thinks that he confirmed it, I guess, is the best way to put it. Either way, this is a very weird situation. Of course, trying out players is not new. I believe the Minnesota Rocker had like a trialing period like last season that we talked about, and there have been teams over the years where instead of just making a roster change and then trying to figure it out after the fact, teams try out sometimes multiple different players, multiple iterations of a roster to try to see what works the best in scrims and hopefully try to find the best roster moving forward. The fact that it's kind of secret, there's nothing, this is obviously news to me. What do you think about all of this, especially with a player like Attach, of course, who is very, very popular and probably would find another CDL home if he was to be replaced?
Yeah, so I think the clip that Breaking Point tweeted with Temp Zero and Takrab from Dope Check, they were watching either a clip or the watch party for Toronto Ultra, I believe, which had Hixie and a content creator named Aroma on it. So I don't know the exact origin of all this, but wanted to at least include them in to reference the work. But and then it seemed like I couldn't find the clip I saw, but there was like a longer version of the Temp clip, and it looked like Temp for for all I know, he could have been doing anything, but it looked like he was kind of like texting to try and see what was going on. And then a couple seconds later, he's like, "Oh yeah, this apparently happened." So I don't know what the deal is. Obviously, Cloud9 played this past week, and they played with Attach. The fact that it's Capsidal, and well, I should say the fact that it's possibly Attach being looked at to be replaced isn't necessarily super surprising to me. It feels like we've been talking about Pred to C9 for a lot of this season. But there was it was the Zuma. There was like a Zuma clip after the second major that said like maybe Attach is getting moved, and Attach was in Zuma's chat, and he was like, "What? That's news to me." So there's at least been rumblings going on that C9 is potentially looking to make a move. The fact that it's Capsidal in place of Attach doesn't make the most sense to me, just because of the roles there. Obviously, Attach has been that second AR with Sib. Capsidal, as far as we've known him in his brief stint in the CDL, is more of an aggressive SMG player. So that would mean, at least in my eyes, Mac would probably move to the second AR if this was to go through. Just because I think Mac was playing really well early in the season. I think Kremp has stepped it up a little bit above Mac in terms of SMG production lately, and we've seen Mac do it on an SMG and an AR in past iterations of his time competing. So that's what I would, well, that's what would make sense to me if this was to go through. But it seems like whether or not they're actually going to make this move, we'll obviously have to wait for their next match. But there's at least conversation around it, and the bigger question, I guess you can say, is how is this going to impact the team? Because there have been instances. The one that does come to mind with me, ironically, it involves a lot of the same people, but like the Pred situation with Optic and Seattle Surge 2 years ago now, back in MW2, I believe, where it seemed to, they obviously never really acknowledged it, they being Seattle, but it definitely seemed like it affected their, maybe not their chemistry necessarily, but just like it affected the team for a little bit from the outside looking in, I feel. And when stuff is, it can just lead to issues like this, because especially if Attach didn't see this coming for whatever reason. He's obviously good friends with Accuracy, and maybe it depends on where the move is coming from and all that stuff. But this could, in the back of Attach's head, he could maybe play a little more timidly, or just be more stressed now, like, oh, if I don't play well, I'm going to get replaced, yada yada, and that could affect his gameplay, and as a result, it could affect how well C9 plays as a team. We saw this past weekend, really, they kind of got dominated by Optic a little bit, because I remember comparing it to when they played Optic at the start of the season, and there was like the online server stuff, but we didn't hear about that same stuff this past iteration, and it was still a 3-0 at the end of the day. So that was their only match this past week. Outside of this, there haven't been any reports that I've seen or anything on a C9 roster move, which makes me think this isn't definitely happening or anything like that beyond, at least like a quote unquote secret tryout or whatever. And the only other thing I will say on that front is it will be, at least in theory, it will be more difficult for some people to see if this is actually happening, just in the sense of I was watching Optic when they scrimmed LAG before this first week of matches, which obviously it was before Johnny and Fellow were officially announced, and the team was scrimming, I believe it was Kismet, Lunars, Lens, the Lens name account, and D-Real were the names on the account. So obviously Johnny and Fellow were scrimming for them, but they were using those names to, like, I guess protect the identities or whatever. So it's very possible that even if Optic like scrimmed C9 tomorrow, for example, like they would still maybe have just an attached name in the scrim, and we would have no way of actually knowing if it's attached or not. I guess you could look at what gun they're using, but even that's not a great indicator or anything. So I don't know. It feels like, just based on the lack of, leaks and reports and clarity on this situation, it might not be something that actually comes to light, but I feel like it was still a little interesting, at least warrants a discussion. And end of the day, even if the move isn't confirmed, it at least seems to suggest that Cloud9 are considering making a move.
It's just a weird timing for me. We talked about between Major 2 and the Major 3 qualifiers, which teams would decide to make a roster change. And I mentioned Cloud9 just because of where they are in the standings, or were in the standings at that time. And, I think they were one of the teams that you could make a realistic argument that they should not make a roster change at that time, because they have looked relatively good, at least compared to where they are in the standings and how bad they looked in the beginning of the season. Like, I looked it up, and they lost 7 of their first 9 matches, and then they were relatively consistent. I think they were a little bit over 500 until the the second major, which has kind of dragged them down. But like, they did pretty well, and then they lost. These are their last 5 losses, or last 6 losses: LAT, Carolina, Atlanta FaZe, LAT, Optic. Optic, you could say, is like the one that you could argue, okay, they shouldn't have lost, but this is also a new Optic team, a different iteration, so we're not entirely sure of what that team is capable of. But everything else is LAT and Atlanta twice each. Those are the 2 best teams, and Carolina is a top 4 or 5 team very easily, who's really just struggled against just a few of the top teams. But they beat, in the last month and a half, 2 months, they beat, most of the teams that they should beat. And I'm unsure of this move, because for me, Capsule doesn't move the needle one way or the other. I don't think of this team much differently at all if they replace Attach with Capsule, or replace really anybody in the roster with Capsule. And that's really no disrespect to him, but it's kind of the same thing that we talked about with Optic. Like, there has to be a big roster change, in my opinion, to really change how I view this team. Or, I still think C9 has the same kind of ceiling, and that's probably like the 5th, 6th range. Like, I don't think of them much higher than that. And with Capsule, I don't think of them any higher with that in mind. So I think it's weird timing. I don't know why this would have been held off until now, because they had. It's kind of like the Optic move. Like, if you're gonna make this change, like, make it now. Like, make it as soon as the major ends, or like that week, and get practice in, be able to prepare for the major 3 qualifiers. And now they've lost one of their 5 qualifying matches, and possibly to a team that they could have beaten. I just think it's kind of silly, and it doesn't set Capsule up for success. Like you mentioned, it doesn't necessarily set Attach up for success, because now he is a part of rumors that's not something any player should go through. If you're going to make a replacement or a roster change, you have to do it now, and you have to make sure that it doesn't bleed into the performance of the team. And we'll see if that happens. But, there's a very good chance that it's not like Attach is, trying to be bad or trying to lose, but it could play tricks on his mind to go into the next match that they play is against LAT, which they need to be at their best, essentially. And, if he's not up to his best, then, they're almost definitely going to lose that match. And they have some winnable matches, but like you mentioned, if Attach is not at his best, or the team is not focused for whatever reason, including this roster change or potential roster change, I think that's doing a disservice to the entire team, and really screwing them over in some very much needed matches, and big opportunities for CDL points. But C9 is not in a good place standings wise. It doesn't seem like they have like a clear vision of where this team is going to be. Maybe this season is kind of a wash. I think they've been very disappointing compared to what we thought they could be at the beginning of the season. Like, where Carolina is right now, I thought C9 would be in that position or somewhere around that.
That's fair.
And now C9 is one of those teams that it really has to fight over these last 6 weeks to make champs, and there's a very good chance that they don't, and that's pretty shocking considering the expectations and just the general roster that they put together. With most of the Surge guys coming back together.
And I will, we do just have to, when we're saying things haven't gone C9's way this year, and that is the place they're in. I mean, you got to think like C9 enters COD at the end of last year thinking they're going to have Hydra on their team.
They were going to be a championship contender, really.
Yeah. And then they obviously, that falls through. They enter the season with this roster, which on paper, like you said, we thought like the comparison I was making was that like we had the top 4 last year, and then we kept, I just remember towards the end of the year, like, is Vegas Legion the gatekeeper of the top of the 5 through 12 or whatever, and that's how we were kind of phrasing like the top of the middle of the pack. And I think that's like kind of like you said, like where we were expecting Cloud9 to be coming into the season. And then they have those online server issues or whatever at the start of the year, and really it felt like they were turning things around in the Major 2 qualifiers and that Major 2 itself. Not like an incredible performance, but just like, especially compared to the issues they faced early on, it felt like they were, at least heading in the right direction or improving. But now we're going to have to see where things go from here. Obviously, it is only one match, and so they have 4 qualifiers left before Major 3. But like you said, if their next one's against LAT, that's a pretty tough match no matter who's on the roster. Even if they don't make a change, or even if they do and try to go for some like honeymoon cheese, that's still a really tough match. So yeah, I guess the only other thing like I got thinking about while you were talking is what do you think? Obviously we don't know if this will or will not happen or anything, but in a world where a move is made by Cloud9 and Attach is benched, what do you think the future holds for Attach? I could see him, retiring. I still think he does have, some good COD left in him, and I could see him, getting picked up on another team, maybe not this season, but ahead of next season potentially. Obviously, there's questions of like expansion and whatnot, so that it's really a a moot point at this point exactly in time. But what do you think the future holds for Attach if he is benched here?
Like you, I think it's probably not going to be this season. I think just if he were to be, just for example, be benched today or tomorrow or whatever, I don't see a team out there that is like itching for him. If this was like 2 weeks ago, he could have been in the running for Vegas's reformed roster.
Yep.
LAG,
Minnesota.
There could have been multiple different teams. I like, obviously, like he has a lot of good connections in the league, but I don't know if that's really going to help him out at this point in time. Like Carolina, he doesn't fit the role, so he's not going to go there. I would imagine.
I could see it if it was attached for Vivid. I could see that. I mean, it wouldn't. Him and Slashers and AR duo might be a little slow, but maybe one of them speeds up and could work. I don't know, but yeah, I do think that's the only counter argument I have to my own point of saying like I don't know if he would get picked up is Kenny literally got picked up by Minnesota when he was consistently dropping 0.7 KDs, and we haven't seen that from Attach. So like I guess the door isn't totally closed and anything's possible. But I do think like if this was happening a couple weeks ago now, like where there were other teams making moves and there were more opportunities, I can maybe see it. I mean maybe Boston could make a move, but obviously it doesn't seem like they want to spend the money. So I don't know, but this is definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on for the rest of the season now.
Yeah, and I mean Carolina is probably the one that comes to mind. And obviously if this doesn't pan out with Skies, that could be the option. Of course, that was rumored like a year or two ago now, and a lot has changed since then. But I could see one of these teams that believes that they can compete, being desperate to make a roster change over these last 6 weeks and bring Attach into their team and maybe figure things out. I kind of doubt it. Like it's just really late for a roster change. We've seen in the past that a lot of the teams that succeed late in the season have the continuity and they've kind of worked out the kinks throughout the entire season. Like I'd have to go back and look, but it feels like the last like 3 or 4 champs winners have been like teams that stuck it out the entire way and didn't make a roster change during that season. I could be wrong, but that just feels like off the top of my head. Granted, they were all very talented rosters, but we've seen very talented rosters break up and make roster changes that they probably shouldn't have, or that they didn't need to, and it doesn't always work out. So we'll see what happens with Attach. This might be nothing. This could be just like kind of a blip, and C9 works out whatever issues there are, or maybe there are no issues to speak of, and all of this stuff was just nonsense. But we will see. or we won't, I guess. Next up, Pred calling for a Vegas practice on his off day. So this was a tweet of a clip, I guess, of Shotzi's stream, or not Shotzi, Zuma watching Shotzi stream. Nameless is involved. This is just a lot of like 4D chess here. But Nameless said that Pred organized a practice session by himself at the Vegas Falcons facility. And I don't know, like, I don't think this is nearly that big of a deal. No. I don't know if you disagree with that. I think this is probably just things that happen like in multiple different teams. Like I would have maybe not setting up a practice session, but I feel like players taking initiative is probably, I would imagine, relatively common, at least among top teams, maybe not among the worst of the worst. But yeah, I don't know. Like this is a new team basically. Like,
yeah,
this is a new head coach because Clayster just got promoted like 3 weeks ago. 3/4 of the team just signed within the last 2 weeks. Only one player has been held over. Like they just have, they're pretty much just starting from scratch. So I could see this being, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have said it's common, but it doesn't seem like a big deal to me. But what do you think?
No, I don't think it's a big deal. It stood out to me because it felt like something Pred previously would not have done. And what I mean by, you think about, obviously Pred hasn't been around for a very long time, but the teams that we've known him on in the CDL era, the Seattle Surge, he obviously had a leader in accuracy on his team. So he was not in a position, he was a young rookie, and if he was like, yo, let's have a team practice or whatever, accuracy would have been like, if he didn't want to do it, he would have been like, what, who the hell are you, like, making a shot call like that? I don't know for sure if that's how the reaction, but for lack of a better way to phrase it, like it's very feasible in my mind that, like, just thinking about Pred's previous team, his first team there with Seattle, he most likely wasn't in a position to have to say, hey guys, let's go do a practice or whatever. And then on this past team, you think that leadership falls to Kenny. And even if you don't think that, and there's obviously been those other, the Pred situation with him leaving the team earlier this year, then coming back in, there's just been a lot of ups and downs with the Optic team this year. And even in previous years, I just feel like that wasn't something we would have heard about the Optic team. And they have, the coaching staff with JP, and now last year they had Karma. So it's like, maybe they just weren't in a position where they had to do that. But I feel like, this could just be something where it's like new team. We're obviously already, in quite a hole in terms of CDL points and whatnot, and just in terms of how long we've been able to play together. If I can get the guys, rally the troops, and get some more work in here, maybe that can help us turn things around this year. So yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think it's a huge deal, but I just feel like it's something we probably wouldn't have heard about Pred doing previously. And if you look at the schedule coming up, the only match for Vegas this week is against Optic. Maybe that plays a role in this. Yeah, he really wants to beat Optic and wants to get some extra work in with the new team. But overall, like you said, you said it could be a common thing or whatever. I just feel like over the years now, like since the dying down of like money eights and stuff, like I feel like they've kind of come back a little bit this year as opposed to previous years. But just in general, that, like, that extra push or the extra work, players wanting to do more, unless it's around champs time, I feel like we don't hear about it much. And for that, it's very possible that stuff goes on and we just don't hear about it. So again, like you said, I don't think it's a huge deal, but it caught my eye, and maybe this is the start of a new phase for Pred. Especially we've talked about him joining this Vegas Falcon teams, and we again don't know the length of his contract or anything like that, but at least speculation wise and on paper, it feels like if Vegas is going to go in this direction where it is at least a part NA roster, they have a really good player in Pred to build around for the future. We obviously don't know if he's going to stay or what the deal is with that. But if it is like a long-term deal or something like that, and he plans on sticking around, maybe this is like the next level Pred goes to, and he ups his leadership and takes on more of a leadership role, a vocal role in the team, trying to, go that extra mile to get some work in. Or, it might just be, like I just said, they're playing Optic. He really wants to beat him. So I don't know. Like, I don't think it's a big deal, but it definitely was interesting to me.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that, about him potentially taking on a different role or position within the team's infrastructure than he has in the past, where he was a young guy or he was coming into an established roster and trying to make it work. Now he is like the guy and it's undisputed. Like in Optic, it was Shotzi is the superstar, maybe not according to Aches, but he's the most popular player. He's established. Dashy is right there with him. Kenny is like the two-time former, or I guess he was a former world champion. Obviously, a very decorated player in his own right. So it's kind of hard to be solidly above those guys in the pecking order. And then, like you said, with Seattle, he was just a young guy. Even though he was, I think everybody would say he's the best player, no doubt about it. But accuracy was the OG, the vet, and now he's the guy. Like he has to step up, or this team is not going to succeed at all. And not like they're gonna have like a ton of success, but like they're not gonna win if he doesn't kind of, I guess, set the standard or help set the standard and try to improve this team's the floor. I guess it's just it's a weird situation. I haven't, like I said, when he joined the team, like I just don't remember a lot of this happening where a great player in his prime goes to a very bad team and like it's by choice. Like I just don't, you don't see this very often. So for Pred to be in this situation, we're kind of seeing what it would be like, and if he is going to take on a leadership role and how that will work out for him, and possibly how it will affect or maybe improve whatever happens after this in his career. Because a lot of these players, they don't do that for a long time, if ever. And then when they do it, they're kind of past their prime. They're not nearly as good as they once were, and they're kind of making up for it with leadership and these intangibles. I think, someone like Kenny, I'm not saying like he's necessarily past his prime, because I guess it could be recaptured in a way, but it does seem like he's not at the same in-game skill level as he once was, and that was obviously World War II, in my opinion. But like maybe Pred could be the rare case of both taking the leadership position and being one of the best players in the world simultaneously. But we'll have to see, I guess, with Vegas. But yeah, that was about it for the pre-match stuff. I didn't see anything else, so we could just hop into the qualifier predictions. So obviously, like we mentioned on the last episode, I think we even mentioned it on this one, there are only 5 matches in the set of qualifiers instead of the 7 that were in the Major 1 and Major 2 qualifiers. So every match is more important, every win, every loss, even more important than in Major 1 and Major 2. But we're going to start with Friday, April 11th, starting off with Miami versus Optic Texas. Of course, Miami, or Florida formerly, has had Optic's number quite a bit. I think
That's true.
I think I have to go with Optic, though, just because they did look pretty good last week. They look like a competent team, which is not something that we could have said for a long, long time. Miami has not looked bad either, but I don't think I can pick against Optic if I just have a sense that they're going to be anywhere close to where they once were.
Yeah, I'm going with Optic here too. I think it's a good shout with the Florida Miami thing. Obviously, we saw just this year, earlier this year, where Florida beat, or no, I got me saying Florida, where Miami beat Optic in the first round of Major 1 winners bracket when Optic were finished first in the qualifiers, and nobody really saw that coming. So it's possible this new look Miami squad pulls something off here, but I'm going to pick Optic. Just while we're talking about Miami again, shout out Super. Dropped that leading 1.35 KD on the week last week in the Major 3 week 1 qualifiers. So um, will be interesting to see how he continues to play now. Another week of practice under his belt with this squad. But yeah, I'll take Optic here.
Next up, Vancouver versus LAG. I'm going to go with Vancouver.
Yeah, got to go with Vancouver here. Is kind of cool that we'll see Fellow play Neptune just because they played together earlier this year. I can't remember. Was it Standy who? I don't think it was. There was somebody last year when Fellow joined Carolina that like Fellow was saying like he's my, he's my son and I still beat him or something like that. There was some funny interaction there. I can't think of who it was. I feel like it was Standy, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'd have to look at Fellow's extensive challengers history to figure this out.
Not even that. But regardless, it's a cool matchup on paper just for that sake, but it's a match that Vancouver should dominate just based on the way both of these teams have been playing, and especially the way Vancouver have looked really since adding Neptune to the squad. So I'll take Vancouver here.
So next up, Carolina versus Minnesota. I'm going to go with Carolina. I think it'll be interesting, though, because obviously the Royal Ravens were linked to Kenny pretty heavily in the roster mania period that we had between the Major 2 and Major 3 qualifiers. Of course, Kenny did not end up going there, reportedly because of financial differences, I guess. And then he signed with Minnesota and he looked pretty good in his first week back. A lot better, of course, than what how he played with Optic. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Carolina still.
I did remember now it was Ghosty who when Ghosty first like joined Optic, that Ghosty and Fellow were like talking back and forth about the father son relationship and stuff. That's what I was thinking of. But yeah, I really, this is one of those matches I am super excited for this weekend. I do think kind of like you said, that narrative there of Kenny potentially going to this team, that falling through, then he goes to Minnesota. Maybe it's extra motivation for Kenny to perform well in this match, but I'm really high on this Minnesota team right now. I think, especially if Kenny is playing at the level we saw this past weekend where he's dropping a 2.0 in hard point on, one map at least, but it felt like he had the most kills in the control against Optic in Minnesota's first match of the weekend. So definitely playing better than that 0.7 KD we were seeing in the Major 2 qualifiers when he was on Optic. And if Kenny's playing like that and the other guys on this team that I think highly of are frying as well, like I feel like this is a recipe for success. I feel like maybe Carolina takes this in a game 5 just because Carolina's been really good at search, and obviously this Minnesota team, it's a newer roster. They probably haven't practiced search as much. But I'll take Minnesota here. I think this is definitely a match I got circled for one of the more exciting ones on the weekend.
4 matches on Saturday, April 12th, the first of which Miami versus Atlanta. Of course, going to go with FaZe.
Yeah, got to take Atlanta. Tough week for Miami, but I am excited to see how Super and the new look squad stack up to these two teams they're facing.
I just want to see Real pop off again. Just like everybody just drools over him because he's like
Real.
Yeah, he's like the jewel of free agency if he is indeed a free agent this offseason. Vegas versus Optic. I'm going to Optic.
Hey, I mean, I'll take Optic too, and just
it would be fun.
Playing Miami and Vegas, it's the teams that are put in front of them, but they get their 2 wins this weekend. They're sitting at 4-0. And I think if you tell Greenwall fans just a couple weeks ago, like, yeah, we're gonna change up half of the champs winning roster after we go 06 and 018 map count, but we're gonna go 04 or 4-0 in the next stage. I think maybe the Greenwall does sign up for it. I don't know, maybe they wouldn't, but I do think this is another match Optic should win. Maybe that extra practice comes in clutch for Pred and the boys. Obviously, he's going to be motivated, but end of the day, I got to pick Optic here.
I mean, it'd just be the most insane way for Vegas to get their first win, considering, like, you know, if they beat Optic in general, it would have been insane. But now with Pred on the roster and him calling practices like he's Coach Carter to get the win.
I mean, we saw Exnid drop the 52 kills or whatever it was early this season against Optic, and that's before he had Pred on his team. So maybe we get another legacy Exnid performance, even though that 52 wasn't enough to get a win back then. So who knows? Maybe Pred will drop 60 this time. That'd be something.
Yeah. Boston versus LAG. I'll go with Boston.
Okay. I kind of assumed you would, so I'm going to take LAG. This is kind of a match where I'm just like, you know.
This is my match. No. I'm so excited.
I guess it is, yeah. I haven't been high on this Boston team for a while now. I do think they played a little better last week, so I could definitely see them taking this one, and they probably should. They're probably the favorites on paper, but I'll take LAG for, just so you have some different matches here.
Yeah, Boston they're a weird team, very hard to predict, I would say, because they, just like we saw at the major, like they're very capable of winning matches that they should not. Like they beat LAT in the first round, and then they lost to two teams that are certainly better than them, and then one of those teams that they lost to at the major, they beat them in the first match of the Major 3 qualifiers, and then lose to Minnesota. So I don't know if you could properly predict what Boston can do. They beat LAG in the last qualifiers. That was a 3-2 win. I don't believe that they played them before that. So this is their second time playing, and LAG is obviously hopefully figuring things out with this new roster. Boston, the one thing Boston has going for them is that they've stuck with this team the entire year. So good, bad, and different. They've been together. I think that says something. I think later in the season it means more, like I said earlier in the show, about teams competing for champs. Boston's not in that category, but they are currently, I believe, in the driver's seat to get one of those champ spots. So they're in 7th place right now. A win would, if Optic were to lose, I guess, both of their matches or whatever, Boston would tie them for 6th place. So that would be pretty cool. And yeah, but I'll go with Boston, but I'm not expecting much either way here. And then we have the last match of the weekend, Cloud9 versus LAT. I guess we could have a different C9 than we saw last week if they decide to make a roster change. It would be very CDL of them to make this roster change or announce it, I guess, on the day that they make, or on the day they play their match. Because that happens like literally every single time we do the podcast. So I'll go with LAT regardless. I don't care who's playing for C9. Like it could be sneaky, like getting in the CDL lobby. Like I'm gonna pick LAT.
Yeah, I'm taking LAT too here. Definitely going to be interesting if C9 does do anything, or we'll have to see. I'm foreseeing that it'll be the same roster playing against LAT, but I mean, regardless, just got to go with LAT here.
And then Sunday, April 13th, we have the final 3 matches of the week. Minnesota versus C9. Man, that's a tough one. I'll go with C9. I'm not convinced by Minnesota's performances last week. Like they beat, obviously, they could have beaten Optic. It was a very winnable series for them, and they could have lost to Boston. So there's some good and there's some bad there. C9, we talked about them quite at length to begin this show, so I don't want to belabor the point, but I'll go with C9. It's kind of like one of the more toss-up series of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going with Minnesota, which means I'm picking Minnesota to go 2-0, which means they definitely aren't going 2-0.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Vancouver versus Carolina. I'll go with Vancouver, but this is probably the most exciting series, to be honest, because Carolina really has looked so bad against LAT, but looked relatively competitive against most of the other top teams. And I think there's a little bit of like with Vancouver, obviously they came out of the gates so hot, and they've picked up a few losses in the past few weeks. So let's see if they can kind of keep up the momentum, or reestablish the momentum that they might have lost at Major 2.
Yeah, I didn't think about it until just now because I was thinking about it for this next match. But from a narrative standpoint, this is a Booza versus Gwyn again for that 2024 Rookie of the Year debate. So there could be some trash talk in that regard in this series. But I think Vancouver's the better team here. Again, if Carolina is able to steal the control, they probably have to Neslo here just because of the way Vancouver's played in hardpoint since Neptune has come into the roster, and just the way Carolina hardpoint has been a talking point for them all year, really. So I guess, if Carolina steals a hard point or Vancouver steals a search, like if either of those happen, I expect that team to win just because of the way the teams play in the other modes. But yeah, I'll take Vancouver here.
I was just looking at Vancouver. So they lost to FaZe, beat Toronto, lost to FaZe, beat Vegas, lost to LAT. That's their last 5 matches. I mean, not like no shame. Like they've lost to LAT and Atlanta twice. One of those being a Game 5, and then one being the Grand Finals. But I just
winners finals and Grand Finals.
Yeah, like it's impressive that they're even to this point, I guess. But yeah, Carolina, they're one of the teams, I think, if you're looking at something to watch for over the Major 3 qualifiers, because we got the report that they were considering a roster change and bringing in Kenny, I think their performance is something to really watch throughout these qualifiers, and of course at Major 3, just because if they struggle and it doesn't seem like they're able to get back over the hump, that could probably be the biggest indicator that they will make a change between Major 3 and the Major 4 qualifiers, or I guess they could make it during the qualifiers. That's happened quite frequently in the recent past, which always boggles my mind, to be honest. But yeah, Carolina could be making a roster change, and if they lose to another top team and they can't again get over that hump, I think that could be a big change coming. And then the last match of the weekend is Toronto versus LAT. I'm going with LAT, but I think these last 2 matches are pretty incredible because these are 2 of the top 5 teams. If Optic is sneaking back up there, you could say 2 of the top 6. But I think right now, with everything that we've seen, these are 4 of the top 5 teams in these last 2 matches of the weekend.
Yeah, I have to pick LAT here. It is worth repeating from last episode that Toronto was going through the online server issues last week, which resulted in them forfeiting a map against Boston and in effect losing that series. So I'm really hoping that those issues are resolved, or at least we don't, have a repeat incident of that here. And again, from a narrative standpoint, this Scrap versus Beans drama that's been brewing now since like Scrap told Beans apparently like if he got top 4 at Major 2, he would double his prize take home or whatever, and then obviously Toronto get third. And I've seen some other stuff, just back and forth, good banter, and I think they even mentioned it in Scrap's post-match interview on the CDL broadcast last week. Him just saying like he's just Beans is somebody that he likes just having fun with, so that's good. But yeah, I think gotta pick LAT here. We'll have to keep an eye on the server stuff, see if there's any issues there. But if not, there could be some body shooting in this match. There could be some good trash talk in the in-game listen-ins, and especially if LAT wins and Scrap does the post-match interview, there could be some fire clips from that. So I think this is a rare instance where the CDL actually got the last match of the weekend right in terms of hype factor.
And then we could get the real main event, which is the CEOs beefing on Twitter. So
true.
Yeah, so pick them. So far this season, you are 102-50 because you went 6-4. I also went 6-4 in the last week of qualifiers, and I am 96-56. Yeah, I mean, I looked it up. It's like 65%, I think, correct?
Pretty good.
So yeah, I don't know how we compare to the desk this season. I know we would have, I think we would have beaten everybody on the
Yeah.
desk last year. So, suck it.
The one I've
But
been
yeah,
keeping an eye on, I think Scump is slightly ahead of me just because I've been watching the Scump watch party. Uh, when I actually like listen. If there's like when basketball was going on and stuff, I would just leave the main broadcast on and mute my laptop. But if I actually want to listen, I've been having the watch party on, and they do the pick'em with Scump, the guy Riley who produces the watch party, and then like Methods, Bose, and Hex. Just like they have worse records than the other two, just because they don't always do all the picks or whatever. But Scump had over 100 right as well, so he's the one I'm keeping my eye on for seeing and comparing where I'm at pick'em wise.
yeah, we could have bet on all these matches and made a ton of money, to be honest. But actually, I don't know if we would have. I don't know if we would have made a bunch of money, but
I mean, I guess we technically could, since we're no longer employed by Value
yeah,
Sports, but we definitely couldn't do that before.
yeah, we could not do that before, and we did not do that legally, right? No, no, I think we would pick too chalk though. Like if we're doing money lines, like we're just gonna get screwed. Like
I don't even know how that would what would you bet on? I guess you could you even do like an over or like a point total for like hard point and do like a 450 point total over under if it's a 250 to 200 game. I don't know if that's a thing
I,
or not.
I don't know. Like I haven't really looked at the betting websites.
Not either.
I know that like the site that I used to bet for like sports and stuff, it would have some Call of Duty matches and stuff, and I always like wondered like what could they possibly put on there, and it was like the series differential. So like 1.5, I think is like the most common because it's like 3-1 or 3-2 or whatever, and then I was like, I'm just a money line guy because I hate spreads. I hate doing math during the game. So I'm cool with money lines, but obviously if we're picking like phase for every match, like that's not good value, I would imagine. And same with, not picking Vegas for all of these matches, even though that would be right now it's working out. So if you bet the money line against Vegas every single match so far this season, it's working out really, really well for you. You probably made like 10 cents all year. But yeah, that is our that's our betting corner segment for this week. We'll be back to talk about betting again next week. But yeah, well, I think that about does it. Obviously, this is one of the shorter shows that we've done in a while, which is a nice change in pace. Like sometimes we go like an hour and a half, which usually I'm like slurring my words by the end of it. But yeah, that about does it. Subscribe, like, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube as well. Look up Ego Chall Podcast on YouTube, and please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. We are also on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. You can watch the live stream of the podcast on Twitch or YouTube. You can also follow Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/jbink with 2Ks. You can follow us both on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers, and the podcast tours at Ego Chall Podcast. I do not believe we will be doing a show this Sunday. It is my sister's birthday, and I am traveling back home or planning to. If not, there will be a show on Sunday. But if there is no show on Sunday, we will be back either early next week or just be back on our normal April 16th Wednesday show. And then obviously the podcast would go into your feeds Thursday morning. So that's the plan for now. Of course, we will be talking about all of the qualifying matches that happened this weekend on the next show, breaking that all down. And if there's any other news that we have to talk about, we will do that as well. I think that about covers everything. And Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys, as always, for all the support. Shout out to VVS Swelf and Shane's Creation in the YouTube chat. Been showing love in the recent stream, so I appreciate that. And yeah, like Preston said, you'll hear when we go live. You'll see when we go live, whether it's Sunday or early next week. But running spiel for now is the clock's ticking on the season. Already week 2 of the Major 3 qualifiers, which means we only got 2 more weeks of online qualifiers before Major 3 itself. Then we're right into 3 more weeks of online qualifiers for Major 4 and the Major 4, and then champs in EWC. So, yeah, a lot of good stuff coming up. Obviously, didn't have a ton to talk about tonight, but that's just the way things go for now. Should have a bunch to talk about whenever we go live for episode 167. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for all the support, and we'll see you whenever we go live again. Remember, Tuesday in the Chow.